What the F? $936 silver. Let's check it out.
GATA's Adrian Douglas has done extensive research into the paper manipulation of gold and silver. But the precious metals world changed overnight when Jeffrey Christian from CPM Group made this startling admission at the CFTC hearing in March.
And people will say, well, and you've heard it today, there's not that much physical metal out there. There isn't. But in the physical market, as the market uses that term, there is much more metal than that. There's 100 times what there is.
Now we know based on the testimony of Jeffrey Christian that everything that's true for gold is true for silver, and silver may be even more suppressed than gold.
Precious metals are financial assets, and like currencies and T-bills and T-bonds, they trade in the multiples of 100 times the underlying physical.
Adrian Douglas's research leads him to conclude that the actual outstanding paper metals manipulation in gold is 45 to 1, meaning there's 45 ounces of gold sold for every 1 physical ounce in the vault, which multiplies the apparent gold supply 45 times, therefore suppressing price to what we see today.
The supply of gold has been artificially increased by this paper gold to what I think is something like 45 times the actual supply. So that means that when that is exposed and people are asking for gold that isn't there, the potential is that gold's purchasing power will be multiplied by 45 times, in rough terms.
There are 45 times as many ounces sold as there exists in the bullion banks. So what's the price of gold for the bullion banker? $56,000 an ounce, because he sold 45 ounces total, but only 1 physical ounce. He received $56,000 per physical ounce. Now the U.S. government claims it has 261.5 million ounces of gold left in their reserves. So let's take them at face value and assume the gold isn't encumbered, which Douglas believes it most likely is. But let's say it's not. People say the dollar is backed by nothing, but that's not actually true. It's actually backed by that gold the government claims is in reserves. Now let's consider the dollar. We've issued $14 trillion against 261.5 million ounces of gold. If you do the division, that comes to $56,000 an ounce, the exact same number as the LBMA selling 45 times as much gold as they've got. Douglas concludes the banks have to sell 45 times more gold than they've got in order to suppress the price of gold and artificially preserve the purchasing power of the dollar.
Typically, gold protects your wealth, but this time it's different. I think what's important for investors to understand is that you will probably be able to buy 45 times more cars or 45 times more houses or 45 times more loaves of bread with your gold than you can today.
According to Adrian Douglas, gold should be at $56,000 an ounce, and Jeffrey Christian admits to 100 times the paper as there is to physical.
Precious metals are financial assets. They trade in the multiples of 100 times the underlying physical.
But let's just go with Adrian Douglas's math. Now, Adrian Douglas is making the argument that at gold's current price, it should be multiplied by 45 times to get the true value of gold. Let's go with that and let's apply it to silver. At a closing price of $20.80, if you multiply that number by 45 times, we will get to an unsuppressed silver price of $936 an ounce. However, we know that silver is more likely further suppressed than gold because it's a much smaller market. We can apply silver's all-time high of $50 an ounce, since gold is currently at its all-time high. And we take $50 an ounce times 45, we get $2,250 an ounce for silver. Now remember, there is such a minuscule supply of precious metals in the physical form, backing all of the fiat currencies on the planet, that these numbers, as pie in the sky as they may seem at first blush, if you really think about it and you think about how rare it is for a person to hold physical in their own possession, these numbers start to make a lot of sense.
That is where I see the big payout for the investors. This manipulation has artificially increased the gold supply. When that disappears, you're not going to be protecting your wealth, you're going to be multiplying it by some large factor, whether it's 45 or 20 or 50, I don't know. But it's going to be something of that magnitude. magnitude.
Don't forget, if you like this video, please hit that like button. Really appreciate that. So our good mate, Jeff Christian from CPM Group, is actually now saying that the silver price could reach $50 again. And if that is Mr. Christian saying that, who, yeah, I'm sure you all know all about Mr. Christian, then I think you can lock this one in the bank, folks. So as you can see, it's an old video, $14 trillion in debt. It's now what, $28 trillion in debt. And so those numbers and figures have changed. And I did this video a little while ago about silver during the reset being 5,126. And this is how Jim Rickards calculates things when we move back to a gold silver standard. So obviously these kind of projections are when the currency fails. So when the US dollar fails. So when is that going to be? I don't know. We've seen Stan Druckenmiller, said that the US dollar will lose its reserve status by 2034, 2035. Jeff Gunlock has said by the end of this decade. And then we've got guys like Dr. Michael Burry and Professor Richard Werner who are saying hyperinflation 2023. And so the US dollar will collapse come 2023. And if those scenarios are right, the only way out of it is to, as monetary history tells us, we go back to a gold or silver standard or a bimetallic standard. And in that case, you do have to reset the price of gold and silver. You have to reset it based on the number of dollars outstanding. Otherwise, you get the problems they had in the UK after the war and in Germany after the war. So Jim Rickards' book, New Case for Gold, goes through all those calculations, how you do it. So very, very simple. I also did this video recently where Luke Groman argues that the US government, to get themselves out of this mess, because they've backed themselves into a corner, that they're going to have to revalue gold to lower the debt to GDP, to give themselves wriggle room to get themselves out of this mess. So Luke has a different argument for $50,000 gold than, say, Jim Rickards, and they come to different. They use different methodologies to come to their high prices. I'll put a link in the description to both these videos if you haven't watched them. Obviously, in my opinion, are we going to see these prices for gold and for silver on their own through the free market? Well, we know it's not a free market, it's manipulated, but are we going to see that? No. Can we see, silver hitting its all-time high of $50? Yes. Could it go triple digits? Yeah, I think it could, especially with, if the physical demand outstrips a lot of the shenanigans going on in the COMEX. Definitely. If that gold silver ratio does tighten, absolutely silver's got a big run. But silver to $936 or silver to $5,000 or anything like that, that only happens when the currency collapses. That only happens when people flee the US dollar, flee the Australian dollar, flee whatever currency that you're in, to move to something that holds its purchasing power. And then the governments are left with no choice. If you study monetary history, when currencies collapse, they always go back to some form of hard money, commodity money, a gold or a silver or a bimetallic standard. And so in my opinion, the only way we get to $50,000, $60,000 gold, $1,000, $5,000 silver, those type of prices is when the currency fails and governments are forced to reset. Now, governments, central banks, they hold precious metals, they hold gold. And so if they're going to go back or try to save their currency, they're going to have to peg it to gold. They're going to have to link it back to gold again. That's what they hold. That's what they own. And the only way you do that and avoid a deflationary or a hyperinflationary bust is you do have to calculate it the way Jim Rickards does, which is the amount of gold that you've got divided by the amount of dollars outstanding. So, these seem pie in the sky type figures, and they're not going to happen unless the currency collapses and governments are forced to reset it. That's my opinion. You might have a different opinion. Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button. Take care, guys, and I'll see you again on another episode of Finance Uncut.